Welcome back to the PreVetted Podcast, where we spotlight extraordinary people and remarkable talent reshaping our world. Today, I am joined by Alex Treiner, his founder and CEO of Make Offshore, independent sales representative for Foxconn, Baja California, and the author of Sherlock DNA, Startup Saga, a #1 Amazon new release based on his 9 years inside Illumina. Alex is a 2 times immigrant, a serial reinventor who went from electrical engineer to founder of multiple startups, including Tailio, which he sold for Nestlé Purina, and now he's a published novelist developing the book into a TV drama series. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Federico. Real glad to be here.
It is great to have you here today. So, for people meeting you for the first time, can you describe a little bit more what are you doing?
Of course. So you already said a few things about me. I just wanted to add that, like when I say that I'm a 2X immigrant, people usually ask what countries I'm from. So I say I speak Russian with a Ukrainian accent. I speak Hebrew with a Russian accent, and I speak English with an Israeli accent. That tells you all.
That's amazing. I'm more used to the Latin America side of the world, so I'm not so familiar with with the European side of the world. Even though I'm Polish, I'm a Polish citizen, so I should be more familiar. Yeah. I think I kind of told you the story, but I'm Polish from my mother's side.
Yeah.
They're golfer, and they come. So my grandmother moved to Argentina when she was 3 years old from a small town called Lotz many years ago, right? And they eventually grew up in Argentina, right? And I moved to Mexico 17 years ago. So you see, like, this side of the world is what I'm more used to.
Do you speak any Polish?
I'm not. And actually, that was the only question that the Polish ambassador asked me. And I was like, no, I'm sorry. And she gave me a speech of, you're getting the Polish citizenship. You should know Polish. And she was right. I had no excuse, right?
I understand some Polish because I've served, first of all, obviously I understand Ukrainian very well. I speak some Ukrainian, and I served on the Polish border in the Soviet army for about 6 months, and we used to listen Polish radio because Russian radio was boring and Polish was like full of Western music. So I picked up some words.
Right. Interesting. So tell us a little more how you end up in Russia, Ukraine, and then Israel.
Yeah, so I was born in the Soviet Union, in Ukraine, which back then it was called on Ukraine. It was a Republic of Ukraine. And so I'm Jewish. My whole family is Jewish, and when I went on 23andMe, I'm so boring. I'm 97% Ashkenazi Jew, but I am 0.3% Viking. So, so that's the most exciting part of me. And every Jew, not every, I can't speak for every Jew, but every Jew I knew at least, right, always longed to get out of the Soviet Union, of that prison. It even says it in my book. And, whoever came to the US, there was always an American dream. But we ended up in Israel. As soon as Gorbachev came to power, I was serving in the Soviet army. As soon as I got back from the army, we applied and we got out. And we lived in Israel for 10 years. And we wanted to pursue our American dream, so we moved over here. And that's a story. It's part of the story described in my book.
Right. Very interesting. Do you feel that there is more freedom in the US compared to Israel?
No, it's the same. I mean, Israel is Israel is a democracy. Unlike now many countries in Europe, for example, in the UK, they're suppressing free speech. It's insane what's going on there. They invented free speech, right? And now they're suppressing it, right?
Oh, interesting.
Unlike there, Israel is an absolutely free country. You can say anything about your government or about anyone, for that matter. There's an old Soviet joke about the free speech. I'm gonna tell you that. An American says to a Soviet guy, says, I can come out to in front of the White House and I can curse my president. Can you do that? He says, yeah. I can also get out on a Red Square and curse your president.
Right.
So yeah, but yeah, to answer your question, Israel is a very free country. Where like
Right.
you feel pretty much the same here and there.
Right. Right. I want to visit Israel. I want to go and visit kibbutz. I understand it's a very interesting. I wouldn't. I want to describe it as a social experiment, but it's actually working. So it's not an experiment anymore. But it's a unique dynamic that I haven't seen anywhere else. Right. So I want to see
Yeah,
what it's all about. Yeah.
kibbutz is a failed experiment.
Oh, really? Interesting.
As much as every social communist experiment in the world, which has been ever conducted, always failed. And yet in the United States now, we have a lot of people who are very vocal, who wants to bring this back in the US, where capitalism is a flawed system, but it's the best system we have. And it's working, right?
Right.
Anyways, yeah. So kibbutz failed. They were idealistic people for a while. They kept going on sheer, idealism and novelty of this, but eventually they all fell apart. They still exist, but they now run as a capitalist enterprise, for anything. So.
Right. They became a corporation basically, or a company.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, we often go to kibbutz to buy some good food, good quality organic
Right.
food and all that, right? They make furniture. They have factories. Many of them actually exported to Europe, to the United States. So it's like it's an enterprise, the usual enterprise. People work there now. They get salary and all that. And many people actually just drive to kibbutz to work there for their day jobs. They don't necessarily live there.
Right. Oh, interesting. Interesting. Yeah. I thought that, when you have a small community that everybody knows everybody, that it's easier to do the shared resources, philosophy. And when you want to scale it, then it doesn't work, right? But it's interesting what you're saying. Yeah. So, talking, changing subject, talking a bit about Illumina. You spent 9 years inside that company, and then you write a novel about that world. When did you first realize this story had to be told?
To be honest with you, maybe very very quickly, let's say what the story is, right? So our
Yes.
listeners will know, right? So first off, Illumina is an amazing company. Illumina is a genetic analysis company who brought DNA sequencing to the world. The very first whole human genome, it took 13 years to sequence, and it costed humankind $30 million, right? $30 million, 13 years, genome number one. The second genome with Illumina, so that was pre-Illumina technology, right? It wasn't all sequencing. It was called capillary sequencing. When Illumina brought its technology to market, it took a couple of weeks, and it costed $200,000 per second genome. And now it takes a few hours, and it costs under $200.
Wow, that's amazing.
So that's kind of the progress and it's just to emphasize what an amazing company it is, right? When I joined Illumina, it was pre-sequencing. So I joined Illumina when it was only 3 years old, was under 100 people, and had zero revenue from products. It basically was making, was working on getting NIH grants and doing some services. So I'm an electrical engineer. So when I joined it, I was hired to develop an electronics of an instrument with an internal name Sherlock, and hence the title of the book. So this is a book right here, and this is Sherlock. That's why I call the book Sherlock DNA. That good-looking guy is not me. I used to have a full head of hair. Right? I can make even that same thing like that guy, but that's not me. That's AI. It's Canva and AI. So anyway, so now to the point, right? So basically, I worked there for almost a year. I did everything that I promised. I was the only electrical engineer on that project, and I single-handedly developed the entire electronics, which was like 6 boards and like 20, 30 cables of that Sherlock instrument. And it worked fine, and it worked fine for several months. Everything was fine. Until one bright morning, a guy comes to work, and 2 instruments very first instruments that were in instrument manufacturing that were supposed to be shipped to a customer within weeks, they were dead. DOA, dead on arrival. So if he calls me, I come in, very, very overconfident, because it's my baby. I know it's inside and out, and I can't figure out what's going on. And this went on for 9.5 months. It brought Illumina to its knees because we weren't able to ship anything. So it was not an easy experience, right? That's kind of the premise. That's the core of the story. And of course, in the book, I also tell the story how Illumina was founded. It's very, very interesting anecdotes. I got to know every founder of Illumina, and they got to know me because I was a hero, or maybe anti-hero, of that 9.5 months long troubleshooting effort. And before writing the book, which I just published 6 months ago, I've interviewed over 50 people who all of them are characters in the book.
Right.
Right. Every single now the book is written as a fiction novel. The company's name is changed. People names are changed, right, to whatever they elected to be a fictional name for them. So that's just very quickly to give you kind of a background about the story. Now, before then, I was a pretty good troubleshooter, and like you always have some bugs and problems and all that. Typically, it takes between minutes to hours to solve, sometimes few days. I never had anything that I would work on more than two days to solve, right? And this it's ongoing. First day, second day, days turns into a week, then weeks, and I'm starting to realize that it's something extraordinary. I can't figure out what's going on. Nobody can. The company brought 5 very highly qualified consultants, electrical engineers with way more experience than I had back at the time, and they couldn't figure out what's going on. So as the story progressed, I already realized something extraordinary, like it's really, really unusual, right? And eventually, when it was resolved, of course, I'm going to spoil by saying the book has happy ending. The Illumina story has a happy ending, and the actual Illumina story is still ongoing, right? The company is thriving and everything. But
Right.
I'm not going to say what it was and all that, right? I'm not going to spoil it, of course.
Right, but it's a near death experience, right? For the company,
you're
right?
You're good. And so to answer the question, me and 50 other people started realizing that it's something extraordinary while the story was unfolding. And then after the successful resolution of the story, when people were telling their relatives and their friends or colleagues from friends from other companies, what was it? Like it became, you can't make this shit up type of story. Like people wouldn't believe that this happened. So that's how extraordinary the story was.
Right, right. That's amazing. I mean, I think that it's interesting to share these stories because it's a great way to get into the insight of how companies operate and how, I mean, it's a combination of passion, skills, and a little bit of luck as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every component should be there. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you're a mechanical engineer, right?
Electrical engineer.
Electrical engineer. Sorry. So for this project, were you using discrete components? Were you able to use integrated components, microchips already, or were you using electromechanical components to build it?
Oh, I see. So yeah. So I've developed several boards. I actually can show you one of them.
Oh, nice. In the meantime, I'll share my. Oh, there you go. Go.
Picture worth 1,000 words.
Yes.
And video probably worth 1,000 pictures. So this is a board that I developed. It's a main board. It's a character in the book. And I'll bring it closer so you could read. Can you read it?
It says, Alex Treiner, thanks for the genetic energy.
Yeah. So when I left the company, and there's a bunch of, I don't know if you can see this, there's a bunch of signatures here and good wishes, right? So
right.
This is one of the boards that I developed, and they signed it for me. Like the entire team signed it for me. So that was my go away present. So this is one of those boards, and you can see there's like bunch of components here, right? The heart of the board is this guy, which is FPGA. So what I did is I've built these boards. I've developed FPGA code. And I worked with a software guy who basically wrote a driver for my board. And besides this board, there were also another 5 boards and a bunch of cables, as I said.
Right. So amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming I'm sure that the level of complexity that you have built on that board and the system makes it super hard to debug, right? And find what are the core issues, right? The root of the problems.
Like first of all, you try to develop things as simply as possible, right? The complexity is not a feature, right? Functionality is a feature. So you have a PRD, product requirements document or specification, right? And all you need to do is you need to meet the spec. But yes, I mean, this board has a lot of different functions. but I've built it in a modular way, right? So which allows you to debug one module at a time, and so that significantly reduces the complexity. Maybe each piece on its own is complex, but if you throw them together, if they would interfere with each other, that would increase the complexity exponentially. But
Right.
I didn't, right? So there's like very clear, if you look at the Bohr's block diagram, there's very clear division here between different modules.
Right.
But yeah, I
Very
mean, look,
interesting.
things start failing. If it's only one subsystem fails, then you know exactly what's going on, right? You can focus on that. But unfortunately, failures were all over.
Right.
And
Right.
so that was really confusing. It was part of so you're absolutely right. The complexity, sheer just number of components and everything, makes it not easy to debug.
Right. And the ones the bugs that I hate the most are the ones that are intermittent, because you cannot head on try to fix them. It sometimes fails, sometimes it doesn't, and it's hard to figure out what's going on. Right.
Exactly. So the failure here in this case was very intermittent. You're absolutely right. For intermittent things, are you familiar with ABA method of troubleshooting?
I am not.
So let's say you have a state A where there's a problem,
Right.
and you think that you figured out what the problem was and you fixed it. So you move this from state A to state B. Now you're in a state B and you're running this and it's not failing. But how do you know that you fixed the problem if the problem is intermittent? Maybe it's just not happening, but the problem is still there. So what you do then, you purposely remove the fix that you put in and move it back into the state A and make sure that it still fails.
Right. You
That's why it's
validate that it
called
fails. You validate that it doesn't.
exactly. That's why it's called ABA. So to go from
Right.
state A to state B is not sufficient. Then like you run it in state B for a while, right? There are no failures. Now you have to prove to yourself that although the problem is intermittent, it's still happening. So you have to go back into state A and prove to yourself, oh, the problem is still there. So yeah, so my fix really works. That's how
Right.
you deal. So that's an ABA approach.
Interesting. And the other added complexity to finding these bugs is when you have delayed to from the change to the change of behavior, right? In a complex system, those delays are natural, right? And
Yeah.
it gets harder and harder to be able to test this. Interesting. So going back to the story, Sam is the protagonist, right?
Yeah.
How much of him was inspired by you?
Right. So first of all, why Sam and not Alex? Because my name is on the
Right.
book, right? You can go into my LinkedIn profile. You can see it's me and all that. I just wanted to pay my respects to my late father, who unfortunately didn't live to see the book. So it's his name. His name is Semyon. So I called myself Sam. That's why. Now,
Interesting.
Sam is 100% based on me. Why? I
Right.
just lack imagination. I couldn't make stuff up. So, but there's a story behind this. So first, once I start writing, subconsciously I depicted Sam as a Superman. He was
Right.
tough, good looking, got his shit together, never backed down, always a fighter. Like my wife read it and said, like, what the heck is this? You gotta show your vulnerability, your real self, with all your shortcomings and everything, right? And so I've rewritten, and I actually then I feel that the guy that I put there, it's much closer to me than the first version of a Superman.
Right. And the writers of Superman had the same issue when they wrote Superman. It was so perfect that then there is no story, because it's super. It can do anything, right? There's nothing. There is no tension. There is no no problem for him to solve, right? So that's why they invented kryptonite. They needed something to make it weak so he could overcome challenges, right? So
Exactly. Yeah. Great
yeah.
one. Yeah. Good for you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the idea of building it as a fictional story allows you to it gives you so many elements to play with and make the story much more interesting to read. Because if you follow exactly everything that happened, there's sometimes that debugging is fun for us, that we kind of know what it is, right? And the challenges. But if you look at it from outside, it's just one guy or a group of guys or whoever, a team, just playing with the thing, right? There's no much to see, right? So you lose that, on the storytelling, you lose that resource, right?
Well, so actually, I've employed a method I wanted to give people a glimpse into electrical engineering, what it is. I am very,
Right.
very proud to be an electrical engineer. Now I'm not an engineer anymore. I'm a startup founder and all that, right? I'm moved on. But once an engineer, always an engineer. Nobody can take it away from you. And electrical engineers are very quirky people with their own things. And I really wanted, as I said, wanted to give people kind of an insight how we operate and look at our problems. So when I first, finished my first round of writing, I put too many technical details. It was too boring and all that, and also too technical. And at first, I went through this like you go in a garden with a rake, right, to pull all the weeds out, to minimize all the technical jargon and everything. And then I used different analogies, like to explain complex technical concepts in a simple way. Like, for example, for an instrument, I use a pizza oven analogy, right? I said the Sherlock as an instrument is like a pizza oven. And an assay that you put in it's like a pizza that, a raw pizza that you put in and then bakes it and like whatever. So, stuff like that. It's everywhere and it's kind of easy to read. And, feedback from my readers, I have out of my readers, very, very small percentage are electrical engineers. Majority of them are, just regular people. Some of them are scientists, some of them just like regular people, accountants and I don't know, lawyers and stuff like that, right? And everybody told me that it was pleasure for them it was an eye-opener and it was an easy read for them. I've made it engaging and captivating by employing some other techniques that some of them I've learned from others, of course, and some I've developed on my own. I've created to myself a little document. It's a single page PDF with like 9 or 10 bullet points on how to create an engaging writing.
Right.
Short chapters, short sentences, very dynamically. Every chapter ends with an emotional. So the whole book is an emotional roller coaster, right? Ups and
Right.
downs all the time. And so, but if you only create drama, it's depressing, right? If every chapter you end with a kind of a dramatic ending. So some of them are, really dramatic. It's the end of the world, it's a cliffhanger, whatever's going to happen. But some of them are actually very end with a hope, with an optimism. As you go to the next chapter, you think, oh, now like the solution is closed, And so that's one of the ways I've made the book engaging.
Right. I mean, like a roller coaster, you have ups and downs.
Exactly.
In order to have the downs, you need the ups. You up slowly and then whee.
Exactly. If everything is flat or everything just downhill, it's not what you want, right?
Yeah, it become very, very sad to read it, right? And
it
and
becomes
when you add
depressing.
hope,
I mean, yeah,
right,
yeah,
right, yeah. And when you add hope, that's anchors that create tensions for you to read the next chapter. It invites you to.
Yeah.
Right. Interesting. So what kind of discipline do you think it needs to build a novel, right?
I've heard people say I have to every day to write something. I have to do like it wasn't like that for me. Discipline only actually came after I've conquered writing. Like to begin with, look, I'm not a writer. I never took any writing or creative writing classes. So, nothing like that. I just, when I conceived the book, I was looking for a ghostwriter. And,
Right.
I actually interviewed several ghostwriters. I picked one and I thought, okay, I just need to prepare kind of a roadmap for him, kind of a bullet point list of things. And I've been walking around and thinking about this for a few days. And then one day I woke up in the morning and I had first two sentences in my head. And I just came down and I started typing and I didn't stop before I had two full chapters written. And
Wow.
it just, the story was so interesting that it just took me on a ride. So I felt like The story was a horse, and I was sitting in a carriage, and this horse was just pulling me. So, like, I was just pulled into this, to be honest, right? So I didn't have to employ any discipline. Moreover, I will tell you this, because of course, obviously, I decided not to work with a ghostwriter. I've written the whole thing myself,
Right.
And I continue as I continued writing. I've realized, I make so many mistakes. I don't know how to do punctuation, especially in English. I don't know how to write dialogue, and all these things, right? Of course, I am an avid reader, and I've read a lot of books, and I used some of them, the best ones, into my taste, as an inspiration. But I thought that, if I pause now and I start researching how to do this and how to do that, I will never finish this book. So I basically put my entrepreneurial hat on, and I said, it's like in a startup, it's scary. Half of the time you don't know what you're doing, but you just gotta push it. And so I basically didn't stop until I've written the whole thing. And so this is kind of the most important piece of advice that I can give, right? Is don't stop. Just, it doesn't matter if it's like in a startup, it's important to put a product on the market.
Right.
I don't remember, one of really well-respected entrepreneurs said that if you put your products, out there, if you launch a product and it doesn't have bugs, you dwelled on it for too long. It needs to be imperfect. So my book,
Right.
when I finished it, it was very imperfect. So it was too long. It has 165,000 words. When I went to ChatGPT and I asked, like, what's supposed to be they said between 80 to 100,000 words. So I had to work really hard to shrink it, to remove stuff. And then, I ended up doing 7 rounds of edits. So editing actually
Right.
took 3 times as long as writing for me.
Oh, wow. Right.
Yeah.
The
So the
Oh, go
only
ahead. Go ahead.
discipline that I can, like, to answer your question, the only discipline is
Right.
don't stop. But I didn't force myself to write because, you have to have this pull to feel this kind of inspiration, right? Sometimes I just trick myself. So I even when, like, I do stuff, like when I go to the gym, right? I don't force myself. I trick myself. I say to myself, I just imagine myself, I'm in the gym now, and I am so enjoying, how my blood is, flowing through my veins and my muscles, and how I feel strong and all that. And that's how I pull myself in. With the writing is the same thing. I imagine, if I have zero in my head, no imagination, no inspiration, I start imagining how I enjoyed yesterday when I was writing, and when the words came out right, and when the sentences, came together, and there was a great flow. And I just imagined and said, okay, I gotta go to my laptop. So that's how I trick myself into working hard, not by willpower, but by tricking myself into understanding that I'm going to enjoy it, right?
Right. Right. Because if it's a drag, then, even if you can have some willpower, but eventually you're going to drop, right? Is what's the
Exactly,
point,
you run
right?
out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you come excited, then it's, easy going, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I told you I just published my first book,
And
which is
again,
the Spanish.
congratulations on the record. I'm putting my
Thank you.
congratulations on the record for you.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I'm still excited, and I don't believe it because I don't have a physical book, right? Like you're showing your book. I still don't cannot believe it myself, right? So I'm super excited about that. And one of the things that I had to work with is, don't try to be perfect. I'm a perfectionist. So I want to be everything perfect, and that that can become overwhelming, right? And you have to accept it's going to be imperfect. Go work on it, and then you can improve it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so that first book, today I talked with my co-author, and he asked me for small changes. Even though we already like review it multiple times, everything, all the details, there's always something, a little touch to add. So yeah, it's hard. And when I was learning at school about technical drawing, they taught us about how to connect two lines. Probably already this, but if you try to connect two lines and you try to connect them exactly at the point, it's not going to look good. So you have to finish right a little bit before getting to the point, right? Now, if you want to touch it, you're going to mess it up, right? So, it's a delicate balance of going right to the point and just right before it, lift up the pen. And that's going to be the best result ever, right?
Yeah.
If you want to, draw it over it, you're going to mess it up. So don't do that, right?
Yeah, there's an expression. I think like perfect is an enemy of good or something. I don't remember what the expression is exactly, but I mean, there's plenty of perfectionism is not a good quality.
So that's the one thing that happened to me. The other one is, as you said, is getting started. Once you get started, the flow happens, right? And then you add more, right? So this book, it's Open the Valve. It's about creativity. I did the Spanish version, Abre la Válvula, and it's 35,000 words, right? Then my book about engineering management, it's 53,000 words, something like that. It's a little bit more because it has more stories and things like that. And then because I was so excited, I kind of put together another book that is 127,000 words, right? Which is about the story of Argentina. I'm trying to teach my son about Argentina's story, and what happened there and what's the country about and the culture, right? So I put together such a big and long book, right? And I realized, and as you said, it's eventually you have to decide what to leave out of the book, and that becomes much more difficult than the actual, once you figure out how to start writing, getting things out becomes, it's so hard. Yeah.
Yeah, you know how I dealt with it?
How?
I basically, exactly, so I had to go from 165,000 words to 95, right?
Right.
So 40% I've removed. Some of them was just fluff, of course, but some of it, really, I took the several entire chapters and I removed them. And I was hardworking, of course, but then I realized, you know what? I'm going to write in my next book. And this will become so I created a parking lot for my next book. And I said, I'm not throwing it away. I'm just moving it into my next book. And that's how I coped with it.
Right. I mean, at least that's a trick for our mind to say, okay, it's going to go somewhere, right? And then that also gives you an excuse to start working on the next book, right? So it's it's tricking ourselves towards the goal, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. And the book describes ethics, loyalty, endurance, and sanity being tested, right? Without spoiling the story, right? What kind of pressure does an engineer actually feel inside a $1 billion race like that?
So there's several layers of pressures, right? But the biggest one is basically it's about not letting down, not disappointing your teammates at work and your family at home. And why family is because my specific situation was that I was on H-1B visa, which is employee-sponsored visa. So the story is back in early 2000s. Back then there was no grace period, right? So today, I think since 2015 in the US, if you're on H-1B visa and you lose your job, you have 3 months to find another job,
right?
And transfer the sponsorship. And if you don't, you have to go home. But back then there was no grace period. So basically you had just a couple of weeks to pack your stuff and leave the country. And losing my job was the biggest fear. Not because, not because money thing, whatever, it's not like we're not poor people, right? My wife is a high school math teacher, was back in Israel. In the US, she didn't work. But, if we went back to Israel, it's not like coming back to North Korea or, Syria where they will kill you, right? Or torture you.
Right.
It's okay. But it's just a huge disappointment. You disappoint yourself, you disappoint your family, right? It's an American dream. So these are the biggest kind of pressures overall, right? Then also there's a pressure of time. You have your boss. Your boss always asks, how long is it going to take? And even in the book, I explained that, troubleshooting is like when when you're on a small boat and you row, right? And you see in an open ocean, all you can see around you is a horizon. So you're trying to get to land, to dry land, but you don't know where it is. and you don't even know if you're moving in the right direction. So you just keep rolling, right? You think that you're in the right direction. You try to look at the birds, at the stars, at the sun, whatever you can, right? At the compass if you have one. And you think that you're moving in the right direction, but you might not even be moving in the right. You might be going in the wrong direction. Who knows? You might be going in circles. So that's what troubleshooting is all about. And then your boss is asking you, okay, so you have to get to the dry land, which you know where it is, how far it is, and even if you're getting closer to it or getting farther away, now you have to tell me when you land on the dry land, when you make your
Right.
landing. So that's another stressor. So there's plenty of those, unfortunately.
Right. I like the analogy, and you're completely right. But I mean, in retrospect, it's easy to see the mistakes you made through the journey. But when you are right there, you don't know how far or how close you are. I don't know if you're familiar with the rugby players that were on a plane and crash landed on a mountain between Argentina and Chile,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, of course,
And
of course.
they were very close to one of the cities, but you don't know because you have no sense of direction there, right?
Yeah.
And they could have walked to the city, but they didn't know they were so close. They didn't know which direction they should go, right? So, and there's a lot of stories like that in that story and many other survivor stories that are the same, so close but so far, right? And I
Yeah.
think that when we're troubleshooting, all we can do is trust the process, right? And then eat the pressure for solving it, because if you try to skip the process, then you're going to make mistakes, right?
One of the characters in my book, he is a Vietnamese guy. He says he said this phrase: sometimes very close and very far is the same thing. It's really deep, in Asia, like Asia is kind of younger than, genetically we know that they're a younger population, right? But they have so much wisdom, like civilization wise, their civilizations are older, right? Chinese civilization
Right.
is 5,000 years old. And so when this Vietnamese guy speaks to me, I feel like his ancestors are speaking through him to me, and I listen to this wisdom.
Right. It sounds ominous when he speaks, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. And you're also developing the story in the book as a TV drama series, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think is a screen the right home for this story?
So it's really simple. There's just one phrase, right? I mean, this is such an amazing story. I want as many people as possible to know the story, right? And the
Right.
way to do it, we know people don't read books anymore as much, don't even listen to audiobooks as much. So putting the story on the screen is the best way to go about it. So that's number one reason, because I want the story to be known. And this story actually is such an extraordinary, it deserves to be told to many people. The second reason is, I've realized, so the book actually ends, the events in the book, they end in mid 2003. But
Right.
Illumina, since then, went through many amazing things. This actually book stops before Illumina got into sequencing. So I wanted to become a biographer of Illumina, and I wanted to tell Illumina's story in an engaging way on the screen as a fiction, right? And I spoke with some people already at Illumina. They like this idea, former Illumina people. They love this idea, and that's why we're going to do it. So not only I want to tell the story that is in the book, but I want to tell the story which is way beyond the book. So I stayed at Illumina for another 7 years, until 2010. But even since then, there was so much drama. Illumina got into sequencing. Illumina had very fierce competitors. She overcame every single one of them, had lawsuits against it, acquired companies. It was a CEO change, there was not the current CEO, but the CEO, one before the current one, made an $8 billion mistake. Billion with a B.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's the story of Grail. So all these stories would be amazing in a on a screen in a TV drama series. That's why.
Right. Right. That's amazing because you have so much potential to talk about all this, and I think that I think I shared this already with you, but I think that the world is so demoralized, right? And you read the news, and so everything is so negative that I think it's important to share this type of stories of because when you see people how successful people are portrayed, it's like they got there, they're so super and amazing and indestructible or whatnot, right? Which there could be a lot of positive things about a lot of the successful tech entrepreneurs and founders, and which are great, but I think it's important to share the stories of challenges, right? Is how many challenges that everybody has overcome to become where they are today, right? And being able to show that, so we can we can transmit that hope to the next generations of, so when they are in those particular difficult challenges that it feels that there's no hope, we can at least give them a glimpse of hope that, things are going to be all right.
Yeah, so many people were in those situations before you, and so many people succeeded that you should believe in your own success. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think that that's become important, and the impact that Illumina has had on the world, I think it's important to share that story. So I'm super excited that you're going to become the storyteller for Illumina.
Fingers crossed. It's still work in progress. Right. It's my current entrepreneurial adventure, right? I'm raising money right now, and all that. But I already have, like, the most important piece is I found a league Hollywood producer who is super excited. I mean, he put, he produced both movies and TV series, and his work is on HBO, on Apple TV Plus, CBS, NBC, ABC, and other platforms. So this guy's amazing. He loves the story, and he said that there's not enough story about technology sector, right? Relatively to lawyers and police detectives and doctors and all that. And specifically within the tech stories, I mean, the story of Facebook, the story of this and that, and like WeWork, for example, Uber, there are fictional stories, but also within this smaller segment of stories about technology, there are almost no stories about biotech. Right? So biotech is kind of a stepchild of storytelling. And he said, it's like he is excited about bringing this story to the screen.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. And I'm sure there are going to be a lot of interesting challenges on, on how to portray it, right, on the screen versus portraying it on the book, right? So that's going to be very interesting to see how you develop that, right?
To be honest, a screen is easier than a book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to describe something vividly enough for people to imagine, but when you put it on screen, it's like it's there, right? It's like you don't even have to kill yourself to imagine that. So to me, writing nonfiction is easier than writing fiction, and writing fiction and depicting things on the screen is easier than writing them. And speaking is easier. Like, for example, now we're talking to each other, right? It's like, it's easy for us, right? But if you would want to put such a dialogue in writing, that's more challenging. So when you go to a form that is freer than the previous, right? Of course, in movie making, in filming, there are different challenges, right? Obviously, there are unique challenges. But I'm saying that just depicting some scenes is much easier on a screen, right?
Right. I see what you're talking about. Yeah. I'm trying to imagine how to convert it. That's why I was thinking about that. Yeah. But I understand what you're saying. Yeah. What are your next plans with the book? You mentioned about probably writing another book, the TV show. What other plans do you see in the future?
You mean for this book of beyond? For this
It could
book?
be for the book, or it could be beyond, right?
Like for the book, I have, I am working now on a second edition, because so many people read it and I got some feedback. I already massaged. It's very, very minor, but still. So I'm going to roll out second edition, and then I'm going to make an audiobook, but not before we finish FIFA World Cup. The Mundial.
Right.
We have
It's
to
coming.
watch the Mundial. Of course, it's coming. Of course. I
Right.
am super excited.
Right. It's actually coming to my town as well.
Whoa, are you serious?
Yeah. I mean, part of it is going to be in the US, if it is going to be in Mexico
Canada.
and in my city in Guadalajara. Yeah. Actually, funny enough, they are canceling classes for the Mundial, for the World Cup.
Smart.
Yeah, because traffic gets harder, so it's like, yeah, we're going to cancel classes, right?
Gonna be a bunch of drunk people walking around. Your kids stay at home.
It's going to get crazy. Yeah. So, what advice would you give founders or engineers, that are working on their first startups, right? Or they're thinking about writing a book, right? What advice would you give them?
So I'm going to give you a quick story how this book came to life. So
Yes.
I always like it took me 20 years to start writing, right? And the reason for that, I always knew that the story is extraordinary, but I always thought of this as my own story. Because how Navy SEALs in the US say, we're tip of the spear, right? I was at the tip of the spear. I was the only electrical engineer who designed everything, and the problems were only with the electronics, nothing else. And, I always, again, as I said, my story. And, I didn't see it as a book. I thought it's an interesting story, but not as a book. And then one day, I had coffee with a friend, a very good friend, and he is also an electrical engineer, and he worked at Illumina at the time of this problem. And eventually he also became involved. He was working on a different project. And I, when we kind of parted, I'm driving home and I'm thinking, oh my God, wait a second. Wasn't he also involved? And it helped me to gain perspective. I pulled myself, I kind of zoomed out and I looked at this and I said, wait a second, it's not my story. It's Illumina's story. It did my family suffer? My wife, my poor wife, she was listening to my, electrical engineering gibberish for 9.5 months. Like, she deserves her story to be told too. And so that's how I saw it clicked, right? So with my book, it has 4 parts. First part 1 is called The American Dream, which tells us, it starts with a hook, of course, with a cliffhanger, how events started. And then I tell the story of my family, very quickly, but in an engaging way, kind of with brushstrokes, how we immigrated, quickly stories about our 2 migrations and how we ended up in the US and how I found this job at Illumina. So the second part is called The Beginnings. And it's where I tell the story of Illumina, how Illumina was founded. It actually starts, almost a year before Illumina was formed as a legal entity. And it also tells a little bit kind of a brushstrokes, my first year at Illumina, only the parts relevant to the story. The third part 3, is called the investigation, which is self-obvious, right? I mean, like, about those 9.5 months, but not only about the investigation, of course. There are some things about the Illumina business and, how we went on vacation and stuff like that. And the last part 4, is called the aftermath, which is kind of self-explanatory, right? Which basically taking, in hindsight, looking at all this process from knowing what actually caused all these problems. So that's how kind of a book is built. So my advice now to kind of the punchline of what I just told, I just gave you the story behind the story, right? How this book came to life. Again, how I just gained a different perspective. I zoomed out and I looked at the big picture and I realized that there was missing pieces. And once these pieces came together, that was a book. Same thing often happens with startups, right? You basically start gaining a tunnel vision. And typically tunnel vision is a negative expression, right? Because it means that you don't see your surrounding. Well, tunnel vision is a feature, it's not a bug. It's a feature of human brain to focus on what's important, right? Without tunnel vision, we would be distracted all time, at all times. However, once in a while, especially if you're a startup founder, you have to pull yourself out of this tunnel, look at the big picture, and even ask yourself, am I still going in the right direction? While I was sitting in this tunnel, in a proverbial tunnel, right? What happened with the world? Maybe within those 2 weeks, I had a 2-week sprint, right? Maybe, there's new companies came out. Maybe there was an, announcement that some VC invested in the company and all that, right? So it's really, really important to keep once in a while, kind of get up for air and look at the big picture and make sure that the world is, you're moving in the right direction in the world that is changing. So that's kind of
Right.
my biggest advice. If you want to write a book, my biggest advice, don't be afraid and never stop. Don't during the writing, don't do things that you can do later during editing, right? Make all the possible mistakes. Who cares? The first draft, nobody cares, right? It's just for your own eyes. So gain momentum, start writing, and don't stop until you finish your first draft. And then you can relax. You can go back and reread it, edit it yourself, edit it with AI, and so on and so forth, right? And lastly, about writing, like, to me, writing style is incredibly important. I would say, like, when you watch a movie, for example, right? If the movie is on maybe even a boring topic, a boring subject, but it's well made, it's still very engaging and it's fun to watch. And sometimes it could be a movie about like extraordinary stuff, like Navy SEAL, Special Forces operation, battle, guns. But if it's not done well, you can't even watch it. Same thing goes about books. It must be written well in an engaging way. And so my advice for this, again, I'm a first-time author. I'm not authority at all, right? But my advice is this: the way how I see it. The one thing in this is a rhythm, is a flow, right? And a rhythm is typically defined by the first sentence or first two sentences of your chapter. So you have to start it right. And if you started wrong, if it's not, doesn't feel right to you, just stop there, scrub them and start anew, right? Because it's
Right.
like, it's like when you cross country skiing in the deep snow and you don't have trucks, you just the first one, right? If you go in the wrong direction, it's very hard to push back because of the deep snow. Same thing with if you started off wrong or just slightly off, it's going to take you further away from the right rhythm. So what you want to do is you want to scrap it, take a deep breath, maybe a few ones, and basically kind of form this first sentence that will have the kind of right rhythm and will take you in the right direction. That's what I discovered for myself. Again, I'm a first-time author. I'm not a celebrity. I'm not a New York Times bestseller. So take it with a grain of salt.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think it's important. Your experience becomes important because we are, once you do your first book, it's easier to do the second and the third, and you keep going from there. So I think that your important becomes your experience is much more relevant and important.
Yeah.
Alex, thank you very much for joining us today. Truly appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to see Sherlock on the TV soon.
Thank you so much, Federico. I'm grateful to you for great questions, for engaging conversation, and I hope everybody will enjoy the book. And if somebody wants me to sign the book for them, I hope you can post my email address. People can email to me, and I will email them a book plate.
Great. Yeah,
Signed
and
with
we
my
will
hand.
put the link, the description in the description of this episode. We're going to put the link of the book so people can go and get it. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Great, Alex. Thank you very much.
Bye.